Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Rennebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello, welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I am Todd Rennebaum. Before we get too far ahead in the episode, I would just like to thank our sponsor, Regina Plumbing and Heating. Their phone number is 585-2000. You can call them for all your plumbing, heating, and cooling needs. Now, this week, or this episode, I guess the same thing. This week's episode, I'm talking to Tyson Williams. He's a really great guy. He's gone through a part of his life where he was suicidal, having lots of depression and anxiety, and he's just got a great story. You'll hear all about it, and how he made an unlikely friend. So, please take a listen. And without further ado, Tyson Williams. So when did you first feel symptoms of depression?
Eventually, after years and years of living with it, diagnosed with depression. Looking back on it now, after what I know about it now, I can remember symptoms of it probably starting when I was maybe 14, 15 in there. And I know for so many people, who start experiencing it at that age, it's tough to really talk about it, because those that do, you're told, oh, it's just puberty or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's all I figured it probably was. So I never told anyone. And at that time it was, it wasn't anything I would say I'd consider severe or anything, but it was just, fleeting thoughts of kind of self-loathing. I'm not good enough. Why study for that test? I'm going to fail it anyway. I played hockey at the time, and, I can remember times when, I would have an open net to shoot at, and I'd miss on purpose. A lot of I'd miss just because I wasn't very good. But there were times I would miss on purpose simply because I didn't want anybody coming up and giving me that hug you see after goals or high fives or anything like that. And so it just kind of bloomed from there, I guess.
Do you mind me asking how old you are now?
I am 45.
Okay. So we're roughly the same age, and it was about the same age I started kind of feeling the same stuff. So very relatable. Yeah. Except I never played hockey. Have you been diagnosed with... Sorry, what's that?
I tried.
Have you been diagnosed with anything, bipolar or anything, or just chronic depression?
Well, with me, it was just chronic depression. And I could get into that part of the story as we progress. But yeah, I was about 34 when I was officially diagnosed. So basically up until that point, I'd lived with it for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, our stories are very, very similar. I was about the same age when I started taking meds. Are you on meds, or did you start taking meds then?
On meds. And it has nothing to do. I always feel I should say this after saying that I'm not on meds. It has absolutely zero to do with not believing in them or anything like that. If I got to a point where the doctor told me, listen, you need these, I'm going to take them. for me at this point, the biggest medicine for me has been simply what we're doing now and talking about it. And that's been huge.
So do you do some advocating on your own? Like you talk quite a bit about it?
I try to. I mean, I did do some talks a few years ago. I think I've done like a grand total of 5. But at the same time, and then, COVID hit. So that kind of shut everything down. And like I told you earlier, in terms of guys being on the circuit who do talk about it professionally and stuff, they're more high in demand. So I'm kind of the bottom of the barrel when it comes to that. It is something I would like to do more of, especially once, or when COVID screws off.
You could swear.
Okay, good. Fucks off. It would be nice to get back out there. Like I did enjoy it. I'd like to talk more to adults. Like the talks I did do were at high schools, which was good, and I would do again in a heartbeat. But I would like to just broaden my horizons and go out more and talking to adults, like I said, and men especially, because I think there's still a lot of men out there that just aren't in a place right now where they feel they can talk openly about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I find a lot of men don't even realize they're going through depression. It's like they're drinking and they're angry all the time, but it's, that's how a lot of men feel depressed. Exactly. Yeah. Did you kind of go through a phase of drinking lots or being angry?
Towards, I wouldn't say so much the anger. In the last few years before I spoke about it for the first time, and before I actually went and got help for it and stuff. My drinking was probably way over the top. And even today, I mean, I'm at a place where, like, I do enjoy, I like my beer. But if I'm having, a really, really rough day, I know to steer clear of it, because it's just going to bring me even more down.
Right. But you don't have it's not like you have an issue drinking. It's just.
No.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of guys that have issues drinking. It's really not helping their situations. But where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Prince Albert.
Oh, okay.
Lived there till I was I'd say about 21. And then I moved to a smaller version of Prince Albert here in North Battle.
How do you find the mental health system in those smaller northern cities?
Oh, man. When it comes to my own personal experience with everything I went through and stuff, I was very fortunate, but I'm also not blind to how bad it is. And not just here, but everywhere. Not just Saskatchewan, but Canada in general. We still have a very long way to go.
It wasn't too long ago when I started advocating, and at that time, Saskatchewan was one of the lowest, they had the lowest money allocated to mental health out of all the provinces, and Canada, out of the G20 countries, was one of the lowest for allocating money to mental health. So it was almost like Saskatchewan was at par with third world countries for their mental health system. I know things have changed in the last, things have gotten better in the last even 5 years, but yeah, man, there's a long way to go yet.
Yeah, sadly that doesn't surprise me. But I always kind of see myself as that eternal optimist. And I look for the positive things. And, I do see, like, nowadays, I do see more people, even men, that do step up, that do talk about their experiences and things like that. And, it's a start.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more people are talking about it openly now than, even 5 years ago.
Yeah. I really think that's the major thing. I think that's the major swing is people talking about it. Because if you don't talk about it, then people don't know what's happening, so they don't know to allocate money to that. So yeah, the more you talk, then the more it becomes in the foreground. So
Yeah.
So what you said you were 34, so that was about 11 years ago. That was that when you started seeking help, or was that like your darkest of the dark moments? And you,
Well, that was kind of both. It was the darkest of the dark, and I mean, through that, light at the end of that tunnel, and basically, to get right into it at that point, I mean, like I said earlier, I'd probably been living with it for about 20 years.
mm-hmm.
I hadn't told another human being what I was going through. I always just kind of figured these were the crappy cards life had had dealt me. And I had been married. We were divorced at that point. And we did have a daughter from that marriage. So with me, my depression always, it was like a self-loathing thing, but it was always kind of attacked the things and the people I love the most. So, I mean, in terms of being a dad, my brain would be constantly telling me what a horrible dad I am.
Mm-hmm.
And, initially in years leading up to that, like I say, for the most part, these thoughts and stuff that were going on were almost fleeting. They would happen maybe a few times a day, but only for a few minutes at a time. And then by the time, like, I was 33, 34 years old, it was 24/7. It was like just never shut up. And I always compare it to when you get in your car to go to work or go wherever, and a good song comes on and you crank the volume up, and you get to where you're going and you turn the car off, and then you come back, you turn the car on, and you realize you forgot to turn the volume down before you got out, and it just blasts you. And that was my brain, 24/7 by that point.
And was there anything that really triggered you at that time? Was it just it was slow and gradual, and it was
like, I mean, I compare it to the radio, also to, you watch those nature shows with, like, the lions, and you just watch how they, they'll sit there for hours watching their prey, and then time they strike. And that's kind of what depression was for me for 20 years. It just, kind of went in one ear, out the other, and then all of a sudden the claws came out and they sunk in, and it wouldn't let go. And at that point, like, years leading up to that, when it came to the, like, thoughts of suicide and things like that, that was never something I was really scared of, mainly because I'm a big chicken shit. And being honest, like, I was just, the thought of it just scared the crap out of me to even try, to do something like that. So because of that, I was never worried about it. But when that's happening and you don't do anything about it, eventually, my brain's telling me now that, there's, who cares if you're scared? It's the only way out. It's the only stop this pain you're in. And then it became very, very real, very quick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very similar to me as well. It became obsessive thinking, really.
Yeah.
At that point that you were getting suicidal and stuff, were you calling in sick a lot? Were you in bed a lot? Or were you still really high functioning and able to go to work and be a functioning person?
Looking back on it now, I mean, there was a period of time where there was a lot of sick calls, but it wasn't that long. Like when I look back on it now, I'm actually amazed at how I'd go on with my normal everyday life. Like I'd go to work, I'd put the mask on. I was playing slow pitch, so I'd go do that and go out with the team after. And and I mean, it would always be like I lived alone at that time. So I'd get home after all that, and that's when I could finally take that mask off. But yeah, like, I mean, other than that one, small period of time where my sick calls did probably pile up, for the most part though, I just kept on going. And I think that's also one of the things that led to my meltdown, so to speak, was because I was wearing that mask so often every day. Like it just becomes so physically and mentally draining. You're exhausted.
Mm-hmm. So was there like a pivotal moment where you thought, oh shit, I need to get help, this has gone too far? Like was there a trigger or something that happened? Was there, you know what I mean, like was there a peak?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, I'll take you through the day.
Sure.
I really have, like, I've never considered myself overly religious or anything. This particular day, though, I mean, call it fate, call it whatever. It's just amazing how things ended up transpiring, because it did get to a point. I did get to a point where I had picked a day to give up, to end my life, and there was no significance to that particular day. I just picked it and spent the days leading up to it, getting things a little bit ready and in order and things like that. And so when that day came, I remember actually the night before that particular day, I probably had one of the best sleeps I'd had in a long time. Like, and that's one of the real tricky and scary things when it comes to suicide is, when you make that decision to do it, there is that, like, I did have that sense of relief, that all this pain, all this garbage, it's going to be over soon. And so I had one, a really good sleep. I woke up the next day. I even went through a couple dry runs of what I was going to do, because for me, this was not going to be an attempt. It was going to be suicide. I was not going to be a person that, attempted it a bunch of times or anything. This for me was one and done. So I wanted to make sure everything was right. And when it was, I just kind of sat around my apartment and was waiting for my brain to tell me, okay, Tyson, go do it. And like I said, fate, whatever, that switch never went off. And I happened to be watching TV, and at the time, there was a show on TSN called Off the Record. It was hosted by a guy named Michael Landsberg, and I used to watch that show religiously. And over the years, it just became one of those shows where I would kind of watch just because there was nothing else on. And I just happened to tune in that day, and that day he had a guest on his show, Stéphane Richer. Some of the younger listeners to this might not know who that was. but he was pretty big in the NHL. Played for Montreal, gag, and New Jersey. Won a couple Stanley Cups and stuff like that. They had maybe a minute and a half to 2 minute conversation about depression. Richer went through about a depression, and he talked about it, and what he was going through. And this was right after he had won the cup with New Jersey. And he had talked about, how he was driving back to Montreal after in that off season, and how he was at a point for him where, as he's driving down the highway, he's looking at, a group of trees and thinking, I go head on into those, it could all be done. And I did a lot of highway driving, and that was always one of my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm just watching this 2 minute conversation these guys are having, and I'm bawling at this point, because it's like they're both reaching through that TV screen and slapping me in the face. Like I'm relating to everything he's talking about in terms of his experiences and all that stuff. And it was like, finally, there's a name to what I'm going through, and it can happen. It was proof that it can happen to anybody. I mean, here's a guy who lived almost every Canadian guy's dream, right? Playing in the NHL, minus the part about Montreal, but playing in the NHL and winning a Stanley Cup. And he was at a point where he wanted to take his life. So I think that shows the power of the illness.
Yeah. And this actually happened the day that you had planned?
This was on the day I had planned.
Wow.
All waiting for, like I said earlier, I spent that day waiting for my brain to tell me, okay, Tyson, go do it. And it hadn't told me that yet. And so after that episode, Michael's email address pops up on the bottom of the screen. And I figure, you know what, I'm just gonna write him a quick little note, quick little email, thanking them for doing the show, for talking about it, that I'm sure it'll save someone's life. Little did I know at that time whose life it would save, but it turned out he responded to me. And I was floored. Like at first I thought, okay, is this really Landsberg or just some lackey he has working for him? But no, it was him. We talked back and forth through email for about maybe 2 hours. And
that same day?
Yeah. Well, that's how I remember it. Or he says it was the next day. But I remember it being the same day. But I do remember after that conversation that we had through email, I went and laid down and cried myself to sleep, partly out of just relief of knowing that I wasn't the only one going through what I was going through, and partly just because my body and my brain were exhausted. And I ended up waking up the next day, and that's when I remember waking up that day and thinking, okay, well, I was supposed to kill myself yesterday, and now it's today. It's like, wow, I made it that day.
Wow. That's pretty powerful, man. Like to get that close, to have a plan. And yeah, it makes you wonder. I know you said you're not a religious person at all, but it makes you wonder sometimes, doesn't it? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you actually got to meet him, or?
I did. Yeah. And I can get into that part. But like, I'll go back to that the following day after I talked. Yeah. And I mean, that was the first time that I had ever told another human being what I was going through. And I mean, keep in mind also at that time, I worked and had been working for 10 years on the front lines at a psychiatric hospital.
Really?
So at no point in that 10 years did I ever look at a patient and think, man, I can relate to what they're going through.
Huh.
Right. And so, you know, just having told somebody, there was this relief there, and I actually did feel a little bit better. It felt good just getting that out, even though it was to a person I figured I'm never going to talk to or meet again. And I kind of coasted on that for, you know, I don't know, maybe a few weeks. And but I didn't do anything, you know, in the meantime, in those 2 weeks. I didn't go to a doctor. I still didn't tell anybody else.
Oh, yeah.
And needless to say, it's, you know, it came back, and it came back harder than ever. And I ended up being taken to the mental health ward at our hospital here, where I spent about a week and a half.
So at that point you reached out?
Yeah, I had called. So this is a few weeks after that talk with Michael I had, and it was, you know, probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was just, I knew if I didn't make a phone call, I was going to die. It was that simple. And I mean, I picked up my phone book again for younger listeners. But I picked up a phone book because, you know, there's always the emergency numbers on the front cover. And I looked to see if there was a suicide hotline listed, and there wasn't. But there was a 24-hour sexual assault hotline. And so I figured, okay, well, the sexual assault people must know some suicide people, and they can steer me in the right direction. And so I called that number, and a lady answered. And, you know, it was kind of funny when I look back on it now, because before I made that phone call, I was just this blubbering mess. You know, as this lady answers the phone, I just, you know, kind of poise myself, and, you know, on my best, just matter of fact way, you know, do you happen to have the number of the suicide hotline?
It's like my mom when I was a kid. She'd be yelling and screaming at us, but the phone rang, and boom.
And there's this pause on the other end, and this lady just, you know, came back with, "Are you okay?" And as soon as she said that blubbering mess came back, and I could hear her talking to someone in the background. I think she may have been on a cell phone or something. But, you know, within minutes, there were 4 cops at my door. And I know there's a lot of people out there who don't have good stories about that. Mm-hmm. You know, cops showing up during mental health distress calls and things like that. Again, fortunately for me, you know, they were 4 really good cops, and we sat down, we talked a while. They talked me into them driving me down to the hospital, and I did, and I spent, you know, maybe a week and a half or so there, and that's when I was officially diagnosed. And again, you know, the whole power of sharing, the power of realizing you're not the only one going through this.
Yeah.
In there, you know, I don't remember talking with doctors or nurses or anything like that. All I remember is standing outside having a smoke, and there was this massive man standing right next to me. And I mean, when you think of, you know, that stereotypical manly man, you know, this guy was, maybe 6'3", 6'4". He was just huge. I mean, his hands were bigger than my head, and he towered over me, is what it felt like. And he kind of looks down at me as we're puffing on our smokes, and he says, "What are you in for?" And I'm scared shitless of this guy. I'm thinking he's going to beat the crap out of me or something. And I just kind of shrugged and said, they tell me I got depression. And all he said after that was, "Oh yeah, man, me too." And he put his hand on my shoulder. And there again, the power of just, I mean, especially at that time, men don't cry. Men don't talk about their feelings. Men don't talk about what they might be struggling with. And here is the most manliest man I've ever seen in my life. And he's in the same boat as I am.
Yeah. I was just talking to a school class of nurses. I do talking sometimes for mental health stuff, and they're all 6 feet apart wearing masks and stuff. And I thought, Jesus, I feel so bad for the people that are in the psych ward now. Because like you said, you guys were close. He put his hand on you. Like the think now during this pandemic, you have to keep 6 feet apart, mask on. You can't. There's still that divide. Like it's harder to share and harder to be open with someone who's you can't even look at their face or be, within 6 feet of them. So I feel really bad for people that were in the hospital now.
Yeah, it's got to be something that would be tough getting used to. Yeah. But like for myself, I still work at that same facility.
Oh yeah.
Had my 22-year anniversary yesterday.
Nice.
And I know, our patients have been really, really good throughout, and we find ways to connect with them.
Oh, good. So now that you've gone through this, do you look at clients or patients now and kind of connect with them?
I can definitely see myself at times in what they're struggling with on a particular day or night or whatever. And yeah, I've shared my experience with some of them over the years, and I like to think it helped.
Yeah, I think it probably is.
I think it's important when someone who's struggling sees somebody else talking.
Yeah.
Because just that simple feeling of, I'm the only one going through this, that happens so much with depression and stuff like that. And to finally realize that, okay, no, I'm not the only one going through it. That alone, usually has a pretty powerful impact on a person.
Yeah, it's just like going to AA meetings for me. It's talking to new members or whatever, and it's people see you have your shit together and they're like, "What? You were in the same boat as I was?" It's like, yeah, man. I mean, it's possible to recover, and we all go through it, so it's nothing to be ashamed of. And like you said, talking helps.
Exactly.
Like, so after you leave the hospital and stuff, how did it come about that you actually met Michael Landsberg, or was there more before that?
No. Well, I mean, when I left the hospital, I was set up with counseling, and so I was going through that. Like I was actually, now at that point, I was working on keeping myself better.
Right.
And that's kind of where, when I say talking is my medicine right now, that's, and that's kind of where that stems from, is, the counseling has been a huge help. I do need to go more, that's something, that I'm always kind of working on, but it helps tremendously. And when it came to actually meeting Landsberg, it was, I want to say, a couple of years later. And again, I was watching TV. So I kind of joke now that, if anyone tells me I watch too much TV, I always say, well, TV saved my life. So watch it. And so I was watching TV, and a commercial come on, and it was the first year that Landsberg was an ambassador for Bell Let's Talk Day. And so I saw that, and then I realized, well, like, I've never told him, because when I sent him that initial email, I didn't say anything about, I was planning on killing myself that day or anything like that. And I thought, I wonder if I still have his email, and maybe I'll send him a quick one just to, remind him. He probably wouldn't remember, but it turns out he did remember. We had a great talk, and he actually, he wrote an article for TSN, and he talked about me in this article. And it was funny, about a week before it was to come out, he sent me a copy of it. And that's when it really hit me, like, shit, this thing is going to be on the internet. Everything. Now, throughout all of this that happened, and at that point, like, I'm doing much better. I'm in a good place, the whole 9 yards. I had still never told anybody in my personal life what I had gone through and where I was at that point. My parents didn't know. Other relatives, friends, they didn't know. And it wasn't until I'm looking at the rough copy of this article and realizing it's going on the internet, I should probably tell some of these people.
So why didn't you tell anybody else?
What's that?
So why didn't you talk to anyone else about it?
My main thing, I think, was because at that point in time, I was doing better, and I didn't want to worry anybody.
Right.
So I figured, okay, well, I went through that garbage. I got through that. I'm in this good place now. Why rehash all that stuff and, worry my parents or whatever, and bring it up? Like, it never crossed my mind that it would make a difference telling anybody at that point.
So nobody knew you were in the hospital for a week and a half?
Well, I imagine some coworkers did.
Right.
Just like, I work in a long-term facility, but I mean, a lot of the staff that work at our facility also work at that place. So I'm sure my name would have been thrown around, that I was there as a patient at some point. No one ever approached me about it, though, or asked me about it. Yeah, in terms of family and friends and stuff, I mean, I was like, I lived alone at that point too. So it wasn't like I had people stopping by all the time, or I didn't talk to my parents every day. So to not, talk to someone for a week and a half about, I don't think that really sent out any alarm bells to anyone.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, so then, like, back to the article, and I kind of did my little tour of going to each parent's place and telling them the story, and a few close friends, and then the story hit the internet, and of course with social media, people were sharing it and stuff like that. And I mean, the response I got was incredible.
Did you get emotional? Was it overwhelming?
Well, even when I talk about some of it now, it kind of sends chills. Like, when I think about how close, when I think about where I am now and how close I came to not being where I am now. I mean, it still sends chills. There's no question about it.
Yeah, it's scary. Have you had any kind of bouts or any dark times since then, but you have the tools now and you were able to work through it.
Well, I think that's just it, and I think that's one of the things I also share about is just the fact that, like, even to this day, like I still have my rougher days, and rougher times and stuff. But like you said, I have the tools now, to kind of realize them when they're happening and do something about them. And whether that be just, making a phone call to a friend who I know, has gone through it, or an appointment with a counselor, whatever. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, like my bad days today would have been like as bad as I might feel in that moment. Like today, as an example, I'm actually having a pretty good day. But if it was a rougher day, and that kind of starts getting me down. But then I think back to, 11 to 2009 when that day was, and I think back to that and I think, geez, like even my bad days today would have been my best days back then.
Yeah, exactly. I know this year's been a little rough for me. Like, I'm quite open and I do a lot of advocating stuff, and I understand when you were saying you didn't want to scare anybody, because this year I've had some shitty times and it's like, oh God, do I do I talk to my wife about how I'm feeling, or is she gonna call the ambulance? And it's like, no, I don't need an ambulance. I just want you to know how I've been feeling. But so it was about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I had a good talk with her and talk with a counselor. And
yeah, and I think with everything that's going on in the world right now, I think it's been tough on a lot of people.
Yeah,
definitely. And I do think that the mental health of people has kind of taken a back seat in a lot of people's eyes, because everyone's so focused on COVID this and COVID that there's a lot of people that are struggling behind this that no one's talking about.
Yeah. So when you met Michael, did he come to North Battleford, or how did that happen?
Actually, that was in 2014, and he was hosting. There was an event in Saskatoon, and it was a major fundraiser for what's called the Neural Health Project, and it was put together by a doctor in Saskatoon and Mike Babcock, actually, who used to coach the Leafs. And this was a major fundraiser, and I'd heard that Landsberg was hosting it. So I immediately text him, like, you know what, I'm saying, I don't care if tickets to this thing are a couple $100. Like, we're going. And I was dating my wife at the time, and I remember her coming home from work, and I was telling her about it, and she was like, yeah, let's do it. Even if we can only afford for you to go, you have to go meet him, like an hour and a half away. So I texted him and I said, yeah, we're doing this. And he was all for it. And I remember going to the website of this fundraiser, and I was, buy tickets and stuff like that. And then I saw the price tag. This fundraiser was $1,000 a plate.
Oh my God.
And as soon as I see that, my heart kind of just sunk. And I texted Michael and I said, listen, I sure hope you got 5 minutes for a coffee or something, because there's no fucking way 1,000 get into the doors in this place. And I guess when you got connections, you got connections. I ended up getting a phone call from the doctor who is head of that project, and she had said that there was a couple that had donated 2 tickets and wanted them to go to someone that would really appreciate them.
Nice.
And so she invited me and my now wife, girlfriend at the time, to go. And so, I mean, that was incredible. We went out. My wife got a new dress for it because this is going to be a fancy thing. Invitation.
A $2,000 dress.
Not quite. But it was funny because the invitation or the description on the invitation for attire was what they called prairie chic. And definition of it was wear something comfortable. If you're in flip-flops, wear flip-flops. So we got my wife a nice dress stuff, and then I hit up Walmart and I got this really nice white golf shirt.
Not a sponsor.
No. And we go to this event, and I mean, there's TSN people there, there's NHL people there, like there's people there that are wearing suits that are probably worth more than what I make in a year. Red carpet at the door, and all these people dressed to the nines. My wife looked smoking hot, and here I am in this beautiful white golf shirt from Walmart, a pair of camo cargo shorts. And I was probably the most comfortable one there. But walked into the building, saw Michael, and I mean, before any words were spoken, it was just one big hug. And it went from there. The event went on, and Michael had told my story while he was up on stage, and how me and him had met and stuff. And then he points to me at the table, and Mike Babcock was actually the first one to kind of let out a cheer and stand up and start clapping. And then the whole room was. And I kind of awkwardly stand up and give a thumbs up, and then I sit back down, but no one's sitting back down. They're still up clapping. I remember looking up at my wife and saying, like, what do I do? Stand up again. So I stood up again. It was really an incredible night. I guess a good first meeting with Michael that and really started this incredible friendship we have to this day. And it was 2 years after that, me and my wife were getting married, and I asked Michael to be a groomsman, and he flew from Toronto. We got married near my wife's hometown, which is about 30 miles north of PA. Michael flew down from Toronto.
Flew up.
And somehow managed to find his way 30 miles north of PA about 5 minutes before the wedding, so he wasn't even late. And so he was a groomsman at my wedding, and That's been awesome. A great.
That's an awesome story, man. Is there? I mean, I could talk about this stuff forever, but it's about an hour. People start getting bored. Is there anything you would want to say to a man that is suffering, that was kind of in your situation, that don't know? You know what I mean? Like they know something's wrong, but they don't know what's wrong. They're not talking.
Just find someone to reach out to, and it could be a stranger. I mean, I'm easy enough to find on social media, but if there's a friend in your life, a spouse, whatever, just that moment you actually tell somebody what it is you're going through will be the biggest difference maker, I think, you'll ever make. And one thing I do now is, like, I'll often show a picture of my family today, I was married once before, and we had a daughter. And so at that time, when I was ready to take my life, she would have been 6. She just turned 18 this past month. So I show this family picture where there's myself, there's my daughter, my 18-year-old, my wife, and me and my wife have 2 daughters. One is 7. The other, our little pandemic baby, was born last May. And, I point to the people in that picture because that 18-year-old in that picture was 6 years old and almost lost her dad. My wife, she, I'm sure, would have, went off and gotten married and had kids of her own, but they wouldn't have been the 2 kids we have now. That 7-year-old and that almost 1-year-old baby, they wouldn't even exist if I had never reached out.
Yeah, right on. Well, I really appreciate you talking to me today, and I'm so very happy you are here and healthy, and when you're not healthy, you're proactive, and that's awesome, and you're spreading the word. You're a delight to talk to, by the way.
And I'd just clarify the healthy part with maybe mentally healthy, because I got quite a good gut going here.
I hear you, man. I put on about 20 pounds this last year. Well, thank you very much again, Tyson. That's just a great story. You've got a great attitude and great sense of humor, and I really appreciate you taking the time to tell your story. And I wish all the best for you in the future, and I think you're going to do great public speaking. Join me next week when I talk to 2 different folks. One is Shane Cockrell, the other Dylan Eckes. They are the founding members of the Inner Man Project. They're based out of Medicine Hat, Alberta. They started this men's health group after numerous suicides took place in their city involving young and middle-aged men. They have a Facebook site called the Inner Man Project, and also Instagram. I believe you can find them under the Inner Man Project. And they're going to talk about their story and what they're up to and all the great services and things that they're doing. It's a very, very inspirational story. They're getting a lot of great feedback and a lot of members. So listen to that. I hate to be one of these guys, but if at all possible, it takes seriously like 30 seconds. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcast, please can you review and rate this podcast? It would really help me out. It would help the podcast out to be able to be listened to by a lot more people. So can you please do that? If you are having a mental health crisis, please call the Canadian crisis number at 1-833-456-4566. In Saskatchewan, the mobile crisis team in Prince Albert is 306-764-1011. In Regina, it's 306-525-5333. And in Saskatoon, it's 306-933-6200. Don't forget to check out my children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Sometimes Daddy Cries is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Available on Amazon.ca. I'll see you next time. This is Todd Redebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Bye.